I'm Jamie and welcome to this video. Now The Last of Us is one of the best games of all time. Yes, it does have its faults, but what doesn't? There have been a whopping 17 million copies sold, and the game has grown a community full of fans. The Last of Us Part 2, which was first announced with a brilliant teaser trailer at PSX in 2016, is aimed to not disappoint, and now it has a gameplay trailer. The trailer is simply brilliant, with Naughty Dog's trademark use of brilliant character development and storytelling, as well as brutal and tense combat. The gameplay showed off loads of new features and a few hints into the story of the game. So, I'm going to break down this trailer and seek out those gameplay changes, and things that are worth noting. I'd recommend watching the gameplay trailer before watching this video, and there will be spoilers for the original Last of Us game. With that said, let's begin. Firstly, we have brilliant lighting in this segment, which is an in-game cutscene which has been captured utilising the PS4 Pro. Now we have the many dancers in the room, slightly out of focus with Ellie's centre frame. The people dancing were actually captured using 9 people in motion capture suits, and then joined together into one sequence. So even though the majority of these dancers are all out of focus, not even deemed important, Naughty Dog placed their efforts into using mocaps instead of animating it. One of the couples dancing is actually a child, seen on the right, indicating this is a prosperous and happy place, and new generations are still being born. The fact that the room is lit as well means that this group obviously have some sort of power. Assuming this cutscene is set in Jackson, Tommy and Maria's hydroelectric dam would most likely be the source of this power. Now Ellie in this game is aged 19, as Neil Druckmann has previously revealed, meaning that this is 5 years since the 20 years later chapter of the original Last of Us, with Outbreak Day being September 26th, 2013, so the infected have been terrorising the world for roughly 25 years, meaning that this game, from what I can work out, is set in the year 2038. With The Last of Us Part 2, they made efforts to improve the realistic qualities of the characters in the game. To do this, Naughty Dog have mapped 40% of Ashley Johnson's face onto Ellie using new motion capture technology. Combining the faces of Ellie and the voice artist and actress who plays her really helps make a more believable character and captures so much more of Ashley Johnson's brilliant performance. Ellie is shown in the cutscene wearing a checkered shirt, which is of course the style of shirt favoured by everyone's favourite morally troubled man, Joel. Obviously Ellie and Joel have been together for some time, and Joel was always teaching Ellie how to survive. Ellie has obviously been listening, as we'll see in the gameplay segment. It is clear to me that even here, Ellie has been influenced by Joel. In fact, I think Ellie may have been influenced too much, as she has everything she could ever want in this cutscene: a happy and apparently safe community, a place to call home. However, she is uncomfortable and perhaps even alienated to this world of happiness, as the original Last of Us game saw Ellie and Joel constantly on the move, constantly on the run from infected, the military, hunters, bandits, cannibals, and eventually the Fireflies. Whereas now, everyone is calm and happy. And this isn't the world Ellie knows. When Ellie sees Dina, she smiles and gets into the beat of the music. She begins to enjoy being at the dance, and being with people she can relax, have a drink and not worry. However, when Ellie sees Jessie coming towards her, she reasserts herself, straightens her posture, and the expression on her face is serious. Ellie doesn't want to admit any weakness to Jessie, not out of pure spite, but in a way that shows she is an adult and she can take care of herself. When Jessie joins Ellie, he begins to talk about Ellie's old man. Now it doesn't take much of a guess that this man is Joel, who was Ellie's friend and appointed protector in the first game. Now Joel at this point would be in his early to mid 50s, and it's worth noting he had a life before the cordyceps infection hit, so he has endured and survived all 25 years of the infection's spread and decimation so far. Jessie continues to suggest that Joel is always more involved when Ellie is drafted into going on patrols for the group. Now this small piece of dialogue tells us that Joel is still always looking out for Ellie, but not necessarily always going with her, as there is no mention of Joel joining in on the patrols. Much like with the game, as Joel isn't playing a massive role in any of the trailers we've seen so far, further suggesting this is Ellie's story. So we can assume the patrols themselves are to maintain the security of the community. We know from the first game that there are lots of bandits in the area, as this is what Maria said, and this statement claimed to be true as the dam was attacked and there was a bandit camp only a mile or two at the most away from the dam. So the patrol could be looking for potential threats in terms of people, but what about the more predictable enemies? The infected are still a problem in this world. There hasn't been the administration of any vaccine or cure. Infected do still roam the world and they are still a threat. Naughty Dog confirmed in their 2018 E3 interview that there will be new types of infected in The Last of Us Part 2, so perhaps the community is under a greater level of danger than they think they are. Back to Jessie and Ellie as they both look at Dina dancing, and it's clear to see that Naughty Dog have placed a huge amount of effort into making the characters look alive, with sweat running down their backs and faces. Dina finishes the dance and Ellie suggests that Dina and Jesse were previously in a relationship, saying they'll be back together in 2 weeks. Jesse denies it, only to ask if Dina has been talking about him. Ellie smirks and says 1 week, suggesting she knows the two still have feelings for each other. Once again showing us The Last of Us, as ever, is the tale of relationships, be it father and daughter, brothers, or that of love and partnership. Back to the cutscene as Dina comes over and leads Ellie over to the dance floor, but not before downing her drink. Now Ellie doesn't have an excuse to stay at the bar. As the pair head to the dance floor, Jesse turns into an authority figure, stating that they need to be ready to meet at first light. Jesse is going to be a character who I think will struggle with being compassionate and critical, with his emotions potentially overshadowing his intellect. Now something to notice about Dina is that as soon as she spots Ellie, she walks over and takes a glass and places her hand on Ellie's shoulder. From that moment on, Dina doesn't let go of Ellie, showing the intimacy of the relationship. Ellie and Dina are obviously friends, but Dina is often acting like she wants it to be more than that. And the way Ellie looks across the room at Dina with an expression of comfort and happiness, it seems Ellie wants it to be more as well. Now I just want to say that in this game, Ellie does appear to be a lesbian, which is absolutely fine and adds to her character development, as we have seen Ellie starting to become more than friends with a girl before in the form of Riley in the Last of Us story DLC, Left Behind, which flashed back to reveal more of Ellie's origin story in terms of how she acquired the famous bite wound, and showed us more of her character as we could see her having fun as well as time jumping, to a time where she was becoming the protector of Joel, not vice versa. Left Behind to me seems to be a blueprint for The Last of Us Part 2, but just expanded and improved many times over. Now once again, back to the cutscene as Ellie and Dina begin talking and slow dancing, with Ellie realising that every boy in the room is looking at Dina. Dina appears to be the girl all the boys are chasing, the one everyone wants to be with, and I think Dina may be tired of being that person who is deemed not as a human, but as a prize. Dina responds to Ellie saying that they may actually all be staring at her, and that they may be jealous of her. Now whether the boys are jealous of Ellie for being the only one to slow dance with Dina would be the obvious answer. But what if the boys are also looking at Ellie jealous of her ability to fight and to survive? As we've seen and will see, Ellie fend off against entire groups of people that one person would find impossible to handle. Ellie responds to Dina saying that she's a girl, not a threat. This statement is made as Ellie is mainly suggesting that her being a girl makes her no threat to the love interest of Dina. However, as Dina reveals, the boys should be terrified as there is the potential for her to love Ellie. The other meaning is due to Ellie being capable of being a brutal and efficient killer, which scares them as much as it scared David's group in the first game, after they witnessed the death toll and brutality the duo of Joel and Ellie can create. And let's not forget that Ellie has a bite mark from one of the infected, a runner. This bite would mean Ellie is infected, but she is still immune. Whether the boys are scared of her as they view her as unkillable, or as they view her as a threat due to the potential that she could turn, is yet to be seen. But the fact is, once people know about Ellie's condition, they'll either understand, think she's insane, or try to kill her. In the cutscene, Dina tells Ellie they should be terrified of her, as Dina begins to kiss her. Ellie is at first shocked and confused, but then accepts it and the pair begin to kiss. Now to achieve the effect of the two characters kissing, the animators and motion capture team had to work tirelessly, as the mocap suits can prevent the pair from actually kissing due to the camera rigs that are often set up. So, the team would have had to animate parts of the kiss and join them together with motion capture, while placing Ellie and Dina closer together than the actors could have been. The amount of detail and level of importance placed in this kiss is great because it is a very important moment. It's where the story could take two paths. One sees Ellie and Dina living happily in Jackson, the other sees Ellie's world getting turned completely upside down, and let's be honest, not many people will want to play a game where the characters live in a perfect life, without conflict, so it's obvious and sad that things soon after this peak of happiness will start to fade and crumble away. Now I attended college and got an extended diploma in media, but you don't need me to tell you that this camera angle of panning around the characters focusing on Dina's bracelet, which I'll talk about in a second, and then panning behind Ellie's head to then reveal, when the camera pulls away, a complete different world, a complete different side of Ellie, it's just brilliant. It quite literally shows us the two of many sides of Ellie's character, a girl and a threat. Here we go then, some Last of Us Part 2 gameplay, and straight away it looks absolutely incredible. Immediately I love the new HUD, and it's very minimalist. It's clean, and it's not overbearing. The colour palette is dark and crisp. The characters stand out and their mannerisms and emotions are displayed with exquisite detail. One of the first things we see as the cutscene begins to merge into gameplay is Ellie is now wearing Dina's bracelet on her arm. The same arm as the tattoo and the bite mark. The focus on the bracelet leads me to believe Ellie is avenging Dina, or that Ellie is going on in her honour. Still, Dina could have given Ellie the bracelet as a gift or good luck charm, but that doesn't feel dark enough for The Last of Us, which, let's not forget, is a game which doesn't shy away from the effects of grief and pain. Ellie can be seen with longer and messier hair than in the cutscene, showing time has indeed passed, and also the colour scheme being the dark shade of blue compared to the cutscene's warmth and glow of colour, shows this is now a time without hope. Ellie is no longer wearing the checkered shirt, and her backpack is different to the one we saw in the original game. This time the childish charms have gone, and it's now a larger capacity bag with more functionality. The knife Ellie is using looks very similar to the one from the first game, and can be seen being utilised as part of a stealth takedown, which has been improved greatly since the last game. And also we can see Ellie has improved in her ability to kill with stealth, especially when compared with the stealth kills where Ellie had to pile all of her body weight into each multiple stab with the knife. Ellie is not full of brute force like Joel, but unlike Joel, Ellie is faster and more agile. Naughty Dog have worked hard to create a world where the enemies are as human as the protagonists, with the enemy Ellie is killing in this scene reaching out their arms, trying to fight for their lives. This choice of making the enemies appear more human really sends across the message of crossing a line in terms of morals and making you question your reasoning for killing each person. Neil Druckmann said the game was about the emotion of hate, and we can only assume that is what drives Ellie and what will ultimately drive the player further into the story. As we reach the moment where the player assumes control, Ellie can be seen in the crouched stealth position. As she shuffles forward, we can already see she's moving slightly faster than Joel. Now the game itself has very little in the way of HUD. It seems to be very clean, cleaner than the original Last of Us. Something I noticed on my many viewings of this trailer is that in the right hand corner of the frame we have this piece in the centre, which changes size dependent on when Ellie is in terms of stealth. From what I can tell, it focuses on when Ellie's behind different types of cover and the enemy's visibility of her. The best example is here, where she heads over to the long grass, a common hiding place in the recent Uncharted games. When she's hiding in the grass, the centre circle shrinks. Neil Druckmann called this mechanic analog stealth. Once again, a very sleek and refined HUD. One other thing Naughty Dog were keen to show was a much more open level design, and that is clear to see with this segment of gameplay alone. We're only 30 seconds in, and you can clearly see 3 potential ways of travelling, one on the left, one in the centre, and the one chosen for this gameplay demo, the right. Each of these routes is demonstrated not by a graphic of a map filling the top corner of the screen, but by the lighting of the enemy's torches, and the way the natural light is brighter going down the paths. Lighting being used to guide the player is subtle but extremely clever. There are loads of small details which add up to a great looking experience, as we can see wildlife like frogs and crows moving about in the game. When an enemy jumps into water or mud, the puddle splashes and the environment moves, with plants moving to match the motion of enemies and Ellie. As Ellie uses stealth to pass the enemies, again showing us that the player doesn't always need to engage in combat, we can see a building with the words "May she guide you" graffitied onto one of its sides. This is a marking of a group of enemies in The Last of Us Part 2, a religious cult which has been confirmed to be related to the one we saw in the brutal Paris Games Week trailer. It's also worth noting all of the hung victims. Perhaps these are all warning signs, offerings, or act as a form of punishment for non-believers. Maybe it's all 3 of these things. Ellie is travelling through a cityscape at this point, but 25 years since the outbreak, nature has taken over and filled the area with trees and bushes and wildlife. Only the shattered artefacts of the past remain, with looted cars and desolate buildings situated on shattered concrete. So as Ellie makes her way forward, a group of enemies can be seen. Ellie uses a new skill as she goes into the long grass and begins to prone, like Snake from Metal Gear Solid. Now it would be interesting to know if you can save this person who is hanging from the telegraph pole. Part of me thinks this is a scripted event, e.g. the person will die no matter what you do, and there's nothing the player can do about it. Something interesting here is the use of whistling, as an enemy whistles, most likely one of those Ellie avoided earlier, sees the enemy Ellie killed and alerts the groups in the nearby area. Now the way these whistles are used as alarms is not only very clever and gives us another distinctive noise for players to keep their ears alert for, but also could provide a new way to play the game, as in the original Last of Us game, Ellie seemed to be very keen on learning to whistle. By the end of the game, she was able to whistle. Now this skill of whistling could be utilised much like a brick or bottle in the original game, with a quiet whistle alerting a singular enemy. The enemy walks over in the direction of the whistle and Ellie pounces from the shadows, penknife in hand, and completes a stealth kill, out of view of nearby enemies. This is just an idea, but I think it would be pretty cool. So, the group of enemies have heard the whistle. They are now alert. The torches go out, making them harder to detect. They hunker down into a defensive body position, and they begin to wield their weapons, guns loaded, knives out of their sheaths, and axes in hands. Ellie backs up, and again we are guided by the light. The player would go where Ellie goes in the demo. The next thing we see is a more compact environment in terms of what looks like a multi-storey car park. 2 enemies lurk ahead, and Ellie selects her signature bow and arrow from her arsenal, giving us our first look at the weapon UI. Straight away we can see our old favourites. Starting at the top, we have a smoke bomb. Moving down we have a health kit. On the right we have a pistol, which has an almost identical look to Uncharted 4's Para 45 or Enforcer, but in terms of The Last of Us, it looks to be similar to the 9mm pistol. On the left we have a bow, and on the far left the selection of the type of ammo, one being normal arrows, and the other option most likely being the new addition known as explosive arrows, which we'll see the effects of later on in the trailer. In the bottom we have a glass bottle, and below that a Molotov cocktail. All of these are in the same positions as they were in the original Last of Us, but this time the icons are clear and the background is transparent, as the game world doesn't stop when you go into the crafting or weapon menus. This is a great improvement. Now this reticle for the bow and arrow to me seems strange. It looks good and appears differently to how I expected, but I missed the arch aiming effect which the original Last of Us had, as shown here. It felt more tense, as I felt I needed to have more precision, as every movement had an effect on the path of the arrow. Here it feels too precise. This may just be a weird criticism. What do you think? Leave a comment below. Back to the task at hand, as Ellie fires the arrow, the sound design is superb, hearing the satisfying whoosh as the arrow slices through the air. The enemy is killed and Ellie remains in stealth. The hit marker is shown in the red colour, looks similar to that used in Uncharted 4, and is a welcome design choice in my eyes, as it is subtle but clear indication that you have killed an enemy, without a huge fanfare or not telling you at all, which would be quite awkward. As Ellie scavenges off the enemy, it's clear that again we have the old scavenge to survive mechanic, as Ellie finds what looks to be explosives. As she picks them up, the spanner symbol appears above the circular HUD piece, telling us that an item can be crafted, just like the original Last of Us does. Now Ellie makes her way up a ramp towards a blind corner. As she pokes around the corner, an enemy walks into view. The enemy nearly spots Ellie, as shown by the on-screen graphic and the all too familiar Last of Us sound effect, used for the same purpose in the original game. So we see Ellie jump down towards a lower level near this van, and the music and sound design are on point. The layout splits again into what looks to be 3 paths, one on the left, one in the middle, which is the path Ellie takes in this demo, and I believe there's a path on the right by going through the window. This shows again how there are many ways of handling a scenario, and that adds value of multiple playthroughs and strategies. Begging the question, is it better to go left or right? Where are the better supplies? Which area is the clearest? Simple questions, but they add so much more to the game. In this next segment, the combat gets more interesting as Ellie attempts another stealth takedown. We can see an enemy looking not only around him, but also underneath objects, making it clear that these enemies are a lot more clever than we had previously seen in Naughty Dog games, with every new stealth opportunity being countered by the enemies with new skills and higher levels of intelligence. The enemies seem too clever for Ellie in this situation, as one spots her and warns Ellie's proposed victim by shouting, "Wolf." Now this is an interesting choice of description. It could be referring to Ellie as a lone wolf, indicating that the cult group have different warnings for different amounts of people. However, when we get to the end of the gameplay segment, one of the enemies says something that made me completely reconsider this description. It's probably best not to get too far ahead of ourselves in the trailer, so we'll come back to this point towards the end of the trailer breakdown. Now as Ellie is spotted, she fires an arrow at the enemy that emitted the warning, injuring but not killing them. Ellie quickly turns to see the original enemy, who swings the axe at her, and Ellie dodges the attack. Now this dodging ability is again new to The Last of Us, this skill playing a crucial role in the gameplay and again being another way of showing the different playstyles of Ellie's agility and Joel's brute force. What's really interesting is that Ellie isn't the only one who can dodge, as the enemies can as well, which adds a new level of strategy to fighting these enemies as the player needs to make every hit count. Now one of my favourite details in this trailer is this part right here. As Ellie dodges one attack, she moves into the side of a car. As she does, the aging suspension moves for a second, making the car's body rock due to the momentum of Ellie. It's a small detail, but once again makes the game that bit more real. Now as Ellie counters an attack, she kills one enemy and grabs their weapon, a hammer. Now this hammer looks very similar to the one used in the Paris Games Week trailer, and is a new melee weapon for the game. Ellie uses this weapon to kill what she thinks is the final enemy in this close area. With each hit of the hammer, the HUD shows a small rectangular shape fading from white to grey. This is the same melee weapon mechanic used in the original Last of Us, as when all the rectangles are grey, the weapon breaks as shown here. When it does break, Ellie quickly picks up a machete from the ground and gets ready to flee, when another enemy appears and fires his gun at her. Now from the sound effect used for the gun, I would imagine it to be a hunting rifle, a weapon used in the first game, most notably in the winter segment which featured Ellie as a main playable character. When Ellie is shot, faint blood spatters appear on the screen, but not in a way that seems comical, instead serious. The health bar shown in the bottom right has gone down, showing Ellie has been injured. Here the player would make the choice of fight or flight, another possible style of playing through this segment. In this demo, Ellie tries to flee, running away as the enemy fires multiple shots. As he does, Ellie ducks in fear and the birds flee from the trees. Both are small and subtle details, but they are just brilliant. As Ellie jumps down onto the flat, she encounters another enemy who starts shooting at her with a pistol. Now from the sound I would say it to be a 9mm pistol, like Ellie's, but the sound is slightly different. Again we see Ellie hide in some long grass, and the analog stealth adapts to what Ellie is doing, and how visible she is. The enemies continue to communicate and show off their new intellect with strategies to find Ellie. Ellie can be seen using the prone stealth mechanic, going underneath a truck. The enemies continue to look for her, with one looking underneath cars and eventually the truck. As she looks under the truck, Ellie steadies herself, you can hear her breathing change, and she prepares to fire. As Ellie kills the enemy, the others are alerted and she gets pulled out from underneath the truck. Here we see the struggle animation as Ellie is pinned to the ground, making the player mash the square button. This action adds to the tension and the frantic nature of combat, with every move made out of desperation to survive. As Ellie gets out of the struggle, she fires 3 bullets in quick succession. This is a very similar scenario to the one seen as Ellie helped Joel out of the university science building. Ellie fights off another enemy with a pistol and then runs out of ammo. An enemy armed with a bow and arrow seizes their chance and shoots Ellie in the shoulder. Now a change from the last game is that as soon as the arrow hits Ellie, part of it snaps, but the other part stays embedded in her shoulder. A symbol appears in the bottom right with the instruction to use the R1 button. This is to remove the arrow from her shoulder. One of my favourite pieces of the gameplay trailer is this sequence here, as Ellie jumps across a gap to a new area which looks like the interior of a shopping centre or mall. Now the developers at Naughty Dog have said that they added a jump button to the game for added traversal, and I can see the benefits of this. Now after Ellie jumps, another arrow passes through the air, just missing her. She sprints again faster than Joel and picks up and throws a bottle in one slick and fluid movement. The bottle hits an enemy, stunning them just like it would in the original game. Ellie then takes the person hostage, putting a gun to the enemy's head. However, the gun is empty. Ellie hopes the enemies don't realise this, but instead they fire an arrow which kills their own. Ellie drops the body and runs towards a makeup shop. It's hard to see, but the enemies Ellie was fighting in the previous area are jumping over to the shopping centre or mall area, meaning the enemies can jump as well. So with 2 enemies closing in and another appearing from around the corner, Ellie runs into the makeup shop. As she does, the enemy fires a gun, which on the way the glass breaks with the shatter pattern and not a singular bullet hole, as well as the sound the shot makes, I would say it's a shotgun. Now as Ellie hides behind the counter and the 3 enemies advance, we can see her removing the arrow from her shoulder. Whether Ellie would lose any health due to blood loss over time remains to be seen. So the 3 enemies enter the room, with one wielding what looks like a pick or sledgehammer, a new weapon for the game, the other 2 have a shotgun, and a bow and arrow. This mixture of enemies and weapons makes the combat more varied and means the player needs to think of a strategy, working out who is the highest threat, who is the lowest threat, how do I get rid of these enemies before they spot me. Here we have another new mechanic which allows Ellie to squeeze between the shelves. Ellie being more nimble allows for a lot more ways to stay hidden and ultimately play the game. As Ellie recovers an arrow from a dead body, the arrow itself is already covered in blood, another piece of great attention to detail. Here is one of the things I've been waiting for, the craft menu. Now it's different to the original Last of Us with a smaller and more minimalist UI, as well as a different way of organisation, splitting the materials into groups, and what can be crafted out of those materials in another. Now it looks like you can use scrap to craft weapons, which is a new feature, as in the original game scrap was not a collectible in terms of material, instead they were parts which could be collected to upgrade weapons at a workbench, so immediately we have a new crafting item. Now the icon next to the one for scrap looks odd. Now I personally think that it's a rag, which was a material in the last game, used for creating health kits and Molotov cocktails. However, looking closer at the icon, it almost looks like a bottle with a handle at the top. What do you think? Leave your comments below. Further along the line we see the familiar explosives, alcohol and blade. However, missing from the first game are the binding materials used to make shivs and melee weapons, and sugar which was used to create smoke bombs. Now I can see why the option to create a shiv isn't present, as Ellie essentially always has a shiv with her, which never breaks, in the form of her switchblade. However, the game does contain the option to craft a melee weapon and a smoke bomb, so I don't think the crafting menu is completely finished yet. As we look at the craftable items, there are the old favourites in the form of health kits, Molotov cocktails, smoke bombs and melee weapons, but also some new items including arrows and explosive arrows. And something that not many people have immediately noticed is on the far left, there is an icon for a gun. However, it looks to have a silencer on the front. So, in The Last of Us Part 2, you can craft a silencer for your gun. If this is true, then I can't wait to try it out, in stealth against humans and of course the infected. One thing to notice is that not all of the slots of craftable items have an icon in, so I imagine there are still more items to be added to the craftable arsenal. What would you like to see as a craftable item in The Last of Us Part 2? I imagine one of the items will be a nail bomb, but what the other ones could be is uncertain to say the least. Now moving back to the gameplay, as Ellie, having crafted an explosive arrow, draws the bow and fires the arrow right at one of the enemies. Blood everywhere. As the room shakes and the items on the shelves move, the nearby enemy is stunned and Ellie charges over for an attack, brutally murdering the shotgun-wielding foe with 2 lethal strikes and the machete she required. The enemy with the large pick hammer charges at Ellie and the pair duel using the machete and pick hammer to block each other's strikes. Ellie is then thrown across a counter in a way that seems similar to Uncharted in the use of set pieces. As Ellie gets up, her adversary attacks and she dodges the strike. Then an arrow flies through the air, Ellie dodges that. She then squeezes through those shelves and kills the bow-carrying enemy. Before she dies, she tells the other enemy Ellie's location, shouting "here," showing that these enemies communicate all the time. As the bow-wielding enemy is killed, her arrows fall to the floor and Ellie picks them up, another great detail. The hammer-holding enemy attacks again, hitting Ellie, bringing her health down to a minimum, the sound and music intensifying as Ellie shoots 3 arrows in quick succession and bringing the enemy to his knees, on the brink of death. Now earlier in this video I mentioned that there may be a deeper meaning to Ellie being called a wolf by the first enemy to spot her. Well, when this enemy is about to die, he begins to pray as he's part of this mysterious cult. Now the words are a bit hard to make out, but I think he says, "Noble as the sacrificed lamb." He also begins to say something else starting with the word "free," but is literally cut off by Ellie. Now if this guy believes himself to be a sacrificed lamb, that could mean he is a small sacrifice for a greater flock, like a flock of sheep. And with Ellie being a wolf, Ellie was like a predator of this cult, and the graffiti which says "May she guide you" is most likely referring to the cult's leader, who I can only assume they refer to as their shepherd who guides the flock of followers. So Ellie finishes killing the enemy with the machete, and then we get a similar transition that was shown at the beginning, as the camera pans behind Ellie's head and we rejoin the original cutscene. The cutscene shows Ellie and Dina finishing their kiss, and then Dina saying that they should be terrified of Ellie. Again, are they referring to the boys in the room, the enemies in the world, or in fact the audience watching the trailer, or the player playing the game? Ellie is brutal, unstoppable, and a survivor filled with hate, but right now she's happy. Maybe happier than she's ever been, as she smiles at Dina, overjoyed, and we cut to black with the logo of The Last of Us Part 2, and some great new music from Gustavo Santaolalla, the original composer of music for the first Last of Us game. And then a final shot of the Naughty Dog paw print logo. That was The Last of Us Part 2 trailer, 11 minutes of pure brilliance from great graphics, superb storytelling, groundbreaking gameplay mechanics, an amazing attention to detail, and so much more. It is a game I simply can't wait to play, and I'm sure you're thinking the same. Well then, that's it for my first video on this channel. I hope you've enjoyed it, as it was great fun to make, picking through each frame of the trailer to find as many details and clues as I could. If there's anything I missed, please write it in the comments below, and try and get a discussion started. If you like this video, then there's plenty more where that came from, as I have ideas of videos planned from The Last of Us Part 2, as well as Days Gone, Dying Light 2 and the Uncharted series, breaking down trailers, analysing characters, creating theories and top 10s, as well as fan-made trailers, and all of these and more will be coming to the Jamie Gibson YouTube channel very soon. This isn't going to be your ordinary gaming channel, it will hopefully be something new, unique and entertaining. If my plans for new videos interest you, then I would love it if you would like and subscribe. I'd really appreciate it. Oh, and by the way, if my voice sounds somehow familiar, you may recognise me as the Whoniverse, which is my other YouTube channel focused on Doctor Who. With all that said, I'd like to thank you very much for watching, and I'll see you in the next video. Bye bye.